Welcome to the Warships Podcast with your host, Kellorn, Vanessaira, and Aaron.
Hello and welcome to episode 121 of the Warships Podcast. I'm your host, Kellorn, and it's that time of year again. The King of the Seas tournament is coming soon, and SeaRaptor is here to tell us all about it. Welcome back to the show, SeaRaptor. It's been quite a while.
It has. Thanks for having me back. I appreciate it.
So I guess, can you give us a little rundown about what KoTS is going to be this year, if there's any been changes from the last season? And then we have a little advertisement that you guys put together, don't we?
Yeah, sure. Okay, so what we've done this year, of course, it's now King of the Sea 8. King of the Sea 7 was last fall, so we've moved on. No major... Well, let me back up. The biggest change that returning teams will notice is that if you comb through the rules set, you'll discover that we've changed the way capital ships work. You're no longer... Used to, we had a limit of 2 battleships and 1 carrier on a team. And the carrier was a real barrier to entry. Most teams that expressed interest in playing in King of the Sea would kind of come to us and say, we'd love to play, but I don't have a decent carrier player. I don't have someone who can compete, et cetera, with the old carrier mechanics. Of course, as we're all well aware by this point, those days are behind us. New carriers are here. So in kind of honor of that and recognizing that the carrier class may or may not have the same impact on a game, we rewrote the rules a little bit to allow no more than 3 capital ships, only one of which may be an aircraft carrier. So if teams want to bring 3 battleships and skip out on the carrier, they can. If they want to bring the traditional setup of 2 battleships and 1 carrier on their team, they can do that as well. It's up to them. And we haven't seen anybody do that, really try around with that yet. But my suspicion is that we'll see some of that over the course of the tournament. Some teams are on certain maps or whatever will try that.
I think that's an interesting gameplay option for a lot of teams. I mean, you can really stack up on the AA battleships and really penalize somebody for trying to take a carrier while you get the firepower and they don't. So I think that might make for some pretty interesting gameplay as you move through the season. Because, I mean, 3 battleships out of 8 players, that's like a lot of firepower.
Yeah, absolutely. 9 players, but definitely. And for us, we're one of the big differentiators that we have between ourselves and clan battles is that carriers are allowed in King of the Sea. They always have been. It's just part of the meta, part of what we ask teams to do. But we're giving players the option now to kind of skip out on that if they want to. Some of that is, I think, maybe an acknowledgement that and hope that the carrier has less of an influence on the overall battle than they used to have in King of the Sea. That may be a vain hope. I don't know. We haven't really seen enough games yet, I think, to know one way or the other. But that's the thinking behind it anyway.
Well, I mean, you'll probably be able to tell relatively quickly as you go through the season if the teams that have carriers are losing for the most part and the teams that have 3 battleships, then maybe you'll have to rethink that next time through.
Yeah, for sure. And I think today's spotting change is going to make a big difference. With 803 coming out today and lowering everyone's aerial detection, that's going to help a bit. Because what we were discovering, we ran a tournament a few weeks ago, War Games, basically using the same format here on NA. And what we discovered is that the early carrier spotting, especially in the competitive format, was just brutal, right? Like you could see the entire team in seconds. That's no different than on random battles. But kind of in conjunction with the contacts at Wargaming, I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with Mimi Missile. She's one of the map makers. The EU guys have aligned to her. And there have been some map changes released on PTS 8.1 that moves the carrier spawns in tournament modes in training room literally all the way to the extreme map edges. So we're trying to reduce the impact of that early spotting as much as we can. And then, of course, also today's changes to aerial spotting ranges, I think, is going to make a big difference as well.
Yeah, and we'll get into that in just a little bit. That's definitely one of our topics for the day. But you guys put an ad together, and it's going to be both a audio ad and a video ad as well. So you have the audio version for us to play here on the show, right, SeaRaptor?
Yeah, go for it. This is the work in progress of the audios together. I'm still getting the video together. I should have it tonight. Several of the NA streamers have volunteered to play this for us over the next week or so because signups are still going. So yeah, roll that when you're ready.
All right, roll that beautiful bean footage.
Have your teammates in random battles got you down?
A little bit of a panic here by the Musashi. No, you just going hard over right, and he's firing HE. Did you see that? He was firing HE.
Are ranked battles raising your blood pressure?
Oh my god.
What are you doing, Neptune?
Then what you need, friend, is some King of the Sea. Our patented 9v9 Tier 10 action is guaranteed to cure what ails you. If you've played clan battles, you may think you know what competitive World of Warships looks like, but you couldn't be more wrong. No classes are excluded. Just round up 8 of your friends and you too can take part in the action. Sign up today at bit.ly/KoTS8NA. That's bit.ly/KoTS8NA. Registration closes at midnight Eastern on Thursday, 28 February, so don't delay. Act now and play in King of the Sea.
There you go, guys. Don't forget to sign up. But I think, Aaron, you had something you wanted to throw in here, right?
Yeah, I just realized that shouldn't your name instead of SeaRaptor be like Sea Rex, King of the Sea?
I never thought about that. That's good.
Oh, man. So I guess what was the impetus for you guys putting together an advertisement this year, Raptor?
Well, one of the things that kind of came up, I don't think it was brought up until maybe we were partway through the last event or something. But I don't remember if it came from internally or the streaming community, but somebody was kind of like, if you guys had an ad leading up to the event, we would totally play the hell out of that on our streams. And I thought, holy crap, why didn't I think of that? That's just super easy. So yeah, that's something I've been trying to get together this time. Just get it all together and roll it out there. And and what I'll probably do this one. We're doing this one now to try and encourage people to sign up, and I'll try and throw another one together very quickly that folks can play over the course of the event to remind people that the event is going on, and that it'll be airing on the weekends on Twitch and stop in and watch and that sort of thing. So.
Awesome. Well, we definitely look forward to it. And I'm looking forward to seeing how the meta happens, because I think it's going to be a real indication of what the next clan battles season might be, because they have indicated that they want to have CVs in future clan battles. So, I mean, this is a real test for a lot of things. So. Yeah,
we'll see. I think they have a long way to go still before carriers are ready for clan battles, but maybe that's just my my negative Nancy coming out. But I'm like you. I'm curious. I'm very curious to see where teams go with this, and I'm excited. I'm ready.
Alrighty. Well, before we dive into this week's topics, we have a holdover from last week. Vanessaira, you said that you needed some time to think about our question from Vegetable Man, and the community is not going to let you forget, because I got several messages both on Discord, on Twitter, and on Facebook that said, we want to hear what Vanessa has to say about this. So without further ado, Vanessa, if there was one major change or tech tree that you could add to World of Warships, what would it be and why?
So after giving it some thought, I felt that, maybe some further diversification in the actual, I don't want to say tech tree, but the actual ship types. So actually having a light and heavy cruiser, distinguishment or specification, having battle cruisers and battleships, and actually having some way to stratify maybe destroyer escorts, or there's just so many different types of ships and categories that I think if it was a little different, maybe we could have some more fine tuning to the team setups. These are actual battleships, these are battle cruisers, these are your heavy cruisers and light cruisers, and so on and so on. And the matchmaking could probably match them a little better, though that might also add a little more difficulty to the matchmaking. But I mean, at least in my mind, you could sit there and look at a team layup or setup and go, okay, well, this is how everything is kind of logically matching up.
Fair enough. SeaRaptor, did you want to throw in something here real quick about this question that we got from Vegetable Man last week?
No, I don't think I have anything. I've like Vanessa, I'm coming at it cold. I'd probably have to put some thought into it. So I don't know. Maybe I'll send you a tweet later or something.
Sounds good. So we'll get into more of the listener questions from you guys a little later when we get to the question of the week segment. But the ranked season is winding down to a close, and I think we need to talk about how it turned out. I mean, we've been talking a lot about the CV rework, but in the background, we have this ranked season that's been something of a bastion for people who don't want to mess around with the new carrier gameplay, either playing it or having carriers in their games. At the same time, the arms race mode has been a new addition to ranked this season, and I want to get you guys' impressions of whether or not that combination of Tier 9 and arms race has been a success and been something different from previous ranked seasons, and if that difference has been good or bad.
So I've really enjoyed this season. I haven't played a tremendous amount. I'm not even rank 5 yet, I don't think. But I came into the season as I'm not going to lie. I came into the season as an arms race hater. I remember trying it. I want to say I played 2 games of arms race when they rolled it out last fall or whatever to try it out, and I blew it off like this is pure garbage. I despised it, and it might have been that just 12v12 or randoms or whatever was not the right mode, but I really enjoyed it in ranked, and I found that the little carrots, right, the little buffs, kind of drove action and positioning. Ships moving around the map into places that they might not have ordinarily gone in a traditional. All right, here's your 3 cap points. Let's all sit around and fight over them. And I really loved the big cap point in the center at the end. I think it's at the 12 minutes remaining mark. You get that big cap point in the center. Everyone is, and if the other team has been driven off or can't field enough force, the game ends. The game falls apart pretty quickly. And I really enjoyed that. I think that from a ship balance perspective, I don't feel like I'm not sure. I think there's some. I'm kind of on the fence about Tier 9, right? Like there's some ships in Tier 9 that I really enjoy playing, but I feel like that from a battleship perspective, it's too heavily skewed toward the premiums. I mean, it was essentially, for the battleships, it was Missouri, Musashi, and Jean Bart. You almost never saw anything else. I saw occasional Freddies here on NA, although apparently Friedrich was much more popular on the Asia server.
Actually, I saw quite a few Freddies. I mean, Freddies were actually one of the most dangerous things that you could see as a destroyer.
I agree. It's one of the most dangerous things you could see as a destroyer. I disagree that they were popular. But you saw tons of premiums in the battleships. Cruisers were virtually non-existent. I mean, I love playing cruiser in ranked when it's ranked 8. It's tier 8 ranked. I play like Atago almost exclusively, and I love doing that. And I wasn't really comfortable trying Ibuki. I did play some Donskoy, and I had a lot of really good games in it. But this was, and then the destroyers, it's essentially World of Kitakazes. Jutland is still a good choice down there, and there's some other options. But so I feel like there are a few. Like you look at the ship pool at Tier 9, and you think, oh look, there's all these options. But in reality, it's a much more compact ship pool, I think, than at Tier 8. Let's just put it that way.
Vanessa, how about you?
Yeah. Here's the thing. I'm still going to advocate that I would still love to see a ranked season that is just tech tree ships and no premiums. Maybe have Wargaming allow, take a tier and rent out every ship in that tier so that anyone can, play any of those ships in a ranked mode that is just those tech tree ships. Because I feel if you take away the premiums, ranked 9 would probably be a really, really good and well-balanced tier of ships going at each other if you take away all the premiums. That being said, arms race, it's different. It is, it definitely, has some high risk, high reward in there. I think, sometimes you can kind of get caught out a bit if you try and go for too many of the buffs, but some of the buffs you definitely absolutely have to go for. And some of them are, like the concealment and the heal buff, I know, especially for destroyers, can vastly change the makeup of a match going along. If you happen to be out of position and the other team, gets those 2 buffs, now all of a sudden, that Kitakaze that normally you would spot before they spot you could now all of a sudden, potentially, have better stealth than you. So there's a lot of implications and things with this mode that are interesting, but I'm still going to advocate to Wargaming that I'd really love to see a ranked season, just, rent all the ships out in that tier, but no premiums. And let's find a tier that, the tech tree ships are extremely well balanced against each other and go from there and see what would happen.
I know the perfect tier for that, where tech tree ships are incredibly well balanced.
If you say
tier 1,
if you say tier 1, I'm gonna smack you around like a little dog.
Okay, I love arms race. I find the mode really fun because it just makes the thing work differently. You are never in a situation, or okay, not never. You're rarely in a situation where you're like, well, I am low HP, thus I can't basically do anything in this match anymore, because you have the passive heal possibilities. If you even don't have any, you can try to at least get one, and then you can heal up. You can join the fight later regardless of the ship class or type or anything like that you are, which I think is really cool and incredibly important because, well, it means that you don't end up in a situation where you feel like I might as well throw my ship away because there's nothing I can do. And this is one of the reasons why I just love Arms Race. However, I haven't actually played too many ranked games either. I think I've played like 9 or 10, so I'm like rank 8 so far. But even though I've played so few games, balance is... I have done 250k damage in a Kitakaza game, for example. So, this isn't quite something you would normally expect in so few matches.
I did 254,000 in Musashi, and took like not potential damage. Actually, took 191,000 damage in a Musashi. It's ridiculous.
Yeah. Okay. So another thing I would like to mention, according to the WoW's numbers website, these are the top 3 performing ships according to win rate in this ranked season. Jutland, Black, and Kronstadt.
Are they? Is that
actually? Actually, the order is usually Jutland, Kronstadt, Black, and this is on Asia, EU, and Russia. On the NA server, it's Jutland, Black, and Kronstadt.
That's really interesting.
Black and Kronstadt are, swapped. That's it. But there's actually some more interesting things. The best performing battleship on Asia, actually the 4th best performing ship in Asia, is Friedrich der Grosse, for example. I guess it happens, and Kitakaza seems to be somewhere up there, but Kitakaza is probably the most popular ship out of the best performing ones, so you would expect her not to be at the very top, right? But Jutland seemed to perform incredibly well numbers-wise, even though she was really popular too. I actually don't know why. I have a hard time explaining why that happened, but that seems to be the case. I have to also mirror the complaint that SeaRaptor had about cruisers. Basically, the only real cruiser that existed was the Kronstadt, and that one plays more like a battleship than anything else. Cruisers just, at tier 9, I don't think they're really worth it. I suppose there's the St. Louis, but it seems like she didn't, perform as well this time.
So I have a couple thoughts that I wanted to share about it. I will say that in previous ranked seasons, when I have played and played seriously, there is only so much rank that I can do without like getting this stress headache of performance and all that. And we're going to lose. And that gets you on a streak and all this stuff. There are a whole bunch of times in previous ranked seasons where I've literally just wanted to quit playing the game as a whole because of how awful I felt while playing ranked. At no point this season have I felt like that. Like the Arms Race season, has allowed a type of gameplay that there's very little static gameplay in Arms Race. Because if you don't go for the things, your team just loses. So there's a huge incentive for you to go for things, but you don't get points for doing that until the end of phase when so you end up actually fighting each other. And you actually have a good time fighting each other, but there's a couple of caveats to that. First, it's even more important in this ranked season to focus fire and to kill low health ships, because if you don't and you let that ship go dark, I saw Friedrich der Grosse have 1,500 health and we couldn't finish it off. It went dark and came back 5 minutes later and had 30,000. I mean, you can't let ships like that go away. And, so the play of one ship, if one guy says, oh, I don't want to shoot that thing, that can affect the course of the entire game. So we went from winning the match to losing because of one guy not shooting. And, that is an interesting balance. But at the same time, like I said, I just was having fun with this game mode. Now, I do feel like this game mode is much more refined than the test version of it that we had several back like 6-7 months ago. But the other thing is, like Musashi at tier 9, I think was a mistake. Because honestly, where that ship is at in the meta, like it is absolutely ridiculous. Like, yeah, I understand that it's not in the top performing ships, and I don't know if that's just because of the people that have her or not. But when I'm in my Musashi, I had a 10 game win streak in Musashi, and it was just ridiculous. Like I felt like I couldn't lose.
So here's a question for you and for everyone. How do you feel about the Save a Star system this time around? Because I don't think I've yet to save a star when I've lost.
For me, honestly, this season, I'm okay with it. I'll just because I've played, like I said, I got talked into playing Donskoy. One of my viewers on stream a couple of weeks ago came in and said, "Oh, you should totally play Donskoy." And I had actually purchased a Donskoy with the intent of playing it in the season, and I'd kind of talked myself out of it. But then he was like, "No, you should totally try it." So I did, and I went 2-2 in the 4 games that I played on stream, and the two losses, I was easily top XP, and it wasn't even close. Like I probably had almost double the XP of the person in second, and they were high caliber. I was top XP, high caliber. Confederate. Like these were ridiculous games in the ship. So I had another loss on my stream last night in the same ship in the same circumstances. Right, I was in Donskoy. I like doubled the guy in second, and I kept my star. So personal. This is personally anecdote. Yeah, it works for me. Overall, I still have beefs with the way the system works because Wargaming touts ranked as the solo competitive mode, but then you're only rewarded for team performance. And I just find the incongruity of those two things to be just it raises my hackles. It makes me really angry.
I can echo that sentiment quite a bit, SeaRaptor. That was one of the reasons why I liked the sprint mode, though, where we got to play with a partner, and I felt like that was much more in line with like the way that the ranked rewards work.
I don't quite get what you mean. The fact that you get rewarded for team performance. I mean, that's kind of how it's supposed to work, though.
Right, but what he's saying is that you win or lose as a team. So the winners all get stars.
Yeah,
and the losers
and that's
all
how
but
it's
one.
supposed to be.
Yeah, the losers all don't get stars. So unless you play very selfishly, you're not going to get a star on the losers team. What I would like to see is that the top portion of the winners team gets a star, and the bottom portion of the winners team doesn't get a star. And then like the top 2 people on the loser team get a star, and then
that
the rest
sounds terrible.
Like I understand there's like a lot of like, but I think that actually rewards.
Think about what you just said. Your earlier complaint was the fact that people don't focus fire, right? Why don't people focus fire? Well, because I have this other target that's much better for me to shoot at because I can deal more damage to it. If you reward people for doing things that aren't entirely about winning the game, they will do things that aren't about winning the game, meaning that you're going to lose more. And in that case, it won't be, you're not trying to play to win the actual game, though.
So what I mean is that Wargaming has always touted ranked as the solo competitive mode. Okay, so the idea being that I'm going to advance or fail fail to advance based on my own performance. But in practice, that's not how it works, right? You can play an amazing game. You can kill 3 ships and have a high caliber and all these achievements and beat the crap out of your team. But if your 2 destroyers YOLO'd and got, torped in smoke or something crazy early, you could still lose very easily. And that's been the ranked plague from day one. That's why I think ranked is so rage inducing for so many people, is that you're dependent on these other people around you, and you're told by the game mode, by Wargaming, we're not going to allow you to take any friends in because this is about solo competitive, but then you're totally dependent on the team for the win or the loss. So I agree with the sentiment that we need to be rewarding players for things that cause the team to win. I absolutely agree with that. But the star system, the way it works now, is that you can, let's say you're that YOLO destroyer, you go out, you get torped and smoked, you die early, your team manages to heroically claw out a win. Congratulations, you got a star, and you contributed basically nothing.
Well, yeah, but here's the problem. It's kind of like economics, right? Where we don't know all of the factors that can make up a victory. We don't know the specific things that all contribute towards the victory. It's not possible to really expect to be able to quantify them. Just like, in economics, you can't do that because there's just too much information, too much context that's necessary. Maybe the destroyer that went out and YOLO'd and died, maybe they warded off, made the enemy destroyer so scared of doing things in that game that because of that you won the game. You'll never know that, and there is absolutely no way we will be able to reward a player for play like that. So it'll end up being, well, the person expects, a victory and hopes that they will end up being not in the bottom half that doesn't get the stars, that they would still advance. Most of the time they'd just be like, okay, I guess I didn't get the star. I'm going to go play the next one. So the thing about a solo gameplay, or the thing about solo gameplay is that your complaint is the same in any multiplayer game where you play as a team. As long as matchmaking, well, even if you can go in there with a friend, you'll still have random teammates. So anytime you have random teammates, you will still have the same complaint. Now, the problem might be bigger or smaller depending on how many friends you can take with you, but it will always be there unless you take an entire team that's all of your friends. Now, the important point of ranked being solo is the fact that when you can bring a friend along, then especially in World of Warships where we don't have skill-based matchmaking, we have a rough estimate based on the ranked system, but that's quite a terrible system. What ends up happening is that if you can bring a friend along, you can bring somebody that is a very good player. So they will be, on average, much better than the random teammate you would be getting on your team. And if you're both decent players, you can basically game matchmaking this way because the chance that the enemy team also gets a division where both players are as good as you is very, very, very low. Much lower than if you were, going alone as a good player. Then the enemy team has a much higher chance of getting a good player on the enemy team as well because, that's just how probabilities work. And so the important bit is the fact that everybody is forced to go it alone. Now, it would be okay if you could have a friend, but in my opinion, in that case, either we need skill-based matchmaking or everybody would have to play with a friend.
I get what you're saying, Arun, and I guess where I'm at is that I think ranked is a fundamentally flawed system, and I would like to see future improvements to the way that it works. That said, I think that this arms race season was a success in making ranked more fun and more palatable to play.
I absolutely agree with that. I traditionally, like you, I've had rage-inducing ranked seasons. For me, this was not one of them. Some of that's because I think I really only played ranked on stream, and I try not to let it get to me too bad when I'm on camera, just because I'm trying to set a good example. But
you'd probably get more followers if you raged. I mean, but that's a conversation for another time.
I kind of disagree with that. I mean, it depends on the type of rage you do. If you do this playful rage, then it's fine. But if you're actually mad, well, I suppose it depends on the person. But if I'm actually mad on camera, then people don't like that. But on the other hand, I've never found that ranked is that rage-inducing for me. It just seems like a game, like any other. And I suppose one of the differences is that I've played enough this type of game mode in other games too, that it's just nothing special in that sense. In fact, I actually like the fact that it's solo and that weird things can happen. But yeah, I guess sometimes it is rage-inducing. I did want to mention one thing though. What do you guys think is the most popular ship, at least according to WoW's numbers, that appeared in this ranked season so far?
I'm going to go with Musashi. Or no, I'm going to say Kitakaze.
I'm going to say Musashi. I think a lot of people, when they were told Musashi was going out of the store, and then they suddenly discovered there was going to be a Tier 9 ranked season, and we had all that steel and coal at Christmas, everybody went out and got a Musashi. That's my opinion.
Vanessa?
Yeah, I would say probably Kitakaze, but I think as far as most popular, I would say probably Kitakaze.
Well, close in terms of Kitakaze is second, but Musashi is undoubtedly number one. On the Asian server, apparently, according to these numbers, she is Her popularity is 27.3%.
Oh my word.
Yeah. Number 2 is Kitakaze at 9.9%. So, yeah.
What is it on NA and EU? You got to tell me.
On NA, it's 13.8 for Musashi and 12.1 for Kitakaze.
So let's go back and think about the bias here a little bit. The Southeast Asia server has a much bigger reason to like culturally want Musashi.
Oh, yeah. I mean, if you think about it, number 3 on the NA server is Fletcher at 8.1%. But on Asia, Fletcher is like, where is she anyway? Can't find her.
Not present. Was not played.
2.8%. Yeah, so it's definitely the case. Absolutely the case. And I mean, Jean Bart on the EU server is also fairly popular, but nowhere near as popular as Musashi and Kitakaze.
I felt so bad because I wanted to play Fletcher this season, right? I love the ship. And I sat down to play ranked, and I just looked at my Jutland, and I was like, I need to grind out daring, and you're probably a better choice for ranked anyway.
Honestly,
I felt dirty.
I feel like Z46 gets a hard rap because I've been playing my Z46 a little bit in ranked, and it is really, really good. When you start getting those torpedo reload boosts, I was down to like 35 seconds of torpedo reload. I mean, I was just tossing out torps everywhere in that thing.
That's insanity. 35 seconds?
Yeah, and when you get a, just one concealment, it really does help make a difference with it too.
Oh yeah, no. So I could have my hydro up and have the hydro range be longer than my detection range.
Right. And see, that's the experience that I had in Donskoy, right? That for everybody, mocks Donskoy because it's spotted from orbit, and it is. But as soon as I get one concealment buff, now I can stealth radar. So that means if I'm spotted, guess what? I can push a button and you're spotted. And so the game at that point, how you can play that ship and especially in the late game, if you can survive to the late game, hunting down destroyers is just not that difficult.
Oh, no. Like I said, I think Arms Race brings a lot of things to the table in ranked that just like the biggest problem with ranked was the static gameplay. You fought over the caps. And that was it. That was the only thing you did. Now there's just so much more to do in Arms Race that each game feels unique, and it doesn't feel like I'm playing the same damn match 40 times.
Agreed.
So we do need to move on. We've got a whole bunch of other stuff to talk about today. The podcast would not be complete lately without the continuing saga of the CV rework. This week, Hotfix 0.8.0.3 changes the interaction of attack aircraft, reduces the visibility of all ships from the air by 20%, improve the fighter consumable AI, but reduce the fighter hit points, and nerf the torpedo alpha of Midway. And I believe it nerfed their flood chance a little bit as well. There was also some balance changes to the premium tier 8 CV Enterprise. For the most part, I feel like these changes are a step in the right direction, but I have to agree with the video that Zoop published today. I feel like the point of having attack aircraft is diminishing rapidly. Now, I do want to make one point that some people are getting confused about. They improved the fighter consumable and reduced the fighter AI. That is not the attack aircraft. The attack aircraft and the fighter consumable are two different things. The fighter consumable is when you press the button and a fighter appears on the map at that point. So do keep that in mind as well. But I guess, Raptor, you haven't been on the show with us while we've been talking about the rework. Is this progressing in the right direction, or is this something that's going to just completely nerf attack aircraft into the point of not even having them?
Well, I'll start off talking about the changes to visibility, because I think that's the single biggest thing to come out of this patch. For me, anyway, it is. I started looking this morning at, I logged in briefly before I went to work, started looking at aerial detection values across the board. Of course, they just basically slashed everything. And it's a pretty big change. One of the biggest complaints of cruiser players, such as myself, coming out of this patch was that suddenly they had shrunk everybody's AA radiuses, okay, but then my aerial detection radius hadn't changed. So I had this huge gap between I could be spotted and I couldn't, by a plane that I couldn't shoot down. That is for certain of a lot of cruisers now gone. It's gone for Worcester in a full stealth build. It's gone for Minotaur in a full stealth build. I think Des Moines still has a very, very narrow gap where you can spot her and not be shot at, but we're talking a couple 100 meters. It's not very large. So, to me, that's a big change. It's going to be very uncomfortable for some of the high tier carrier players to kind of return, I think, to that world where, you could, when you were, suddenly you're flying your planes and bam, as soon as you spot that ship, you are getting destroyed by its AA. That's one of the things I always used to love about Minotaur, was that you build the ship outright, the AA range matched the aerial detection. So as soon as you were spotted, you could fight back. So to me, that's a step in the right direction. Now, whether or not that's going to cause them to want to start retuning AA values, that I can't say. But I feel like starting to really focus on the detection problem, especially for cruisers, is definitely a step in the right direction. With the attack aircraft, I don't know. It's hard to say. I know low tier attack aircraft for me were never a thing. At tier 4, tier 6, the amount of damage you can do with those rockets to destroyers. Yeah, you pop them. They're harassing, right? You can reset them. You can keep them spotted. You can do a little damage. You can light a few fires. It's really at high tier that the attacker aircraft, with the heavier rockets or the sheer number that they vomited out, really became a big problem for destroyers. So the nice thing now is, it sounds like, as I'm understanding the patches, and I haven't actually played this yet, but as I'm understanding it, they've lowered the spotting range on the destroyers. So now an average higher tier destroyer is probably spotted under 3 kilometers by the air. And then they've lengthened the drop time of the attack aircraft. So now, let's say early in a match, what I've been doing, I take my little rocket planes out, I'm flying around, I see a destroyer, I spot him. Great. So now I've got to circle back around to make my attack run. But now I'm going to lose sight of him as I try to get turned around. And by the time I pick him up again, where's he going to be? Surely he's going to have taken some evasive action. Maybe he's smoked before I can pick him up again. So, it feels like on paper that this might be a step in the right direction towards that carrier-destroyer interaction that's been so horrible these last few weeks. Is it too far? That I don't know. I think that's one of these things that we're just going to have to see how it plays out. But I like the idea of it, because it really discouraged destroyers from being aggressive. And that's one of the things that I like about playing a destroyer, is that, I'm kind of the pointy end of the spear. I'm up front, I'm trying to cap, I'm trying to spot. But basically being off by myself against a Hakuryu or a Midway as a destroyer, especially if I didn't have the defensive fire consumable, felt bad, right? Like you were just asking to slowly get whittled down.
Erwin, you've been kind of our resident expert on carriers. What do you think that this hotfix addresses well, and what do you think this hotfix addresses poorly?
Well, I think people who are going to play tier 8 CVs after this are how do I put this nicely? I'm not sure what would be wrong with them, is basically what I would like to ask, because if you get into tier 10 games and the air detectability range of a Minotaur and a Worcester is 5.9 kilometers, and their anti-air range is 6.9 kilometers, especially a Minotaur whose medium range anti-air range is 5 kilometers, meaning that if you fly if you happen to fly towards a Minotaur who has their anti-air turned off and then start turning around the moment you spot them, you will probably enter the medium range anti-air. And if you're a tier 8 CV, you probably lost all of those planes immediately. I think that's going to be a bit of a problem for CVs, especially when you are being up-tiered. And, the problem with something being a bit of a problem is that for some reason, people really enjoy shooting down planes in this game. I love doing that, by the way. And if enough people just start going Minotaur just to shoot down planes, I think this is going to negatively impact people wanting to play CVs. And as a result, I don't know what the impact is going to be, because people might simply at one point go, yeah, I guess it's not worth playing CVs. And to be honest, I don't quite understand the Midway change either, the torpedo damage reduction, because the torpedo's damage was reduced from 5,367 to 4,233, which isn't a big change, right? But to think about it, the torpedo basically never does full damage. It does slightly less usually. If you hit the torpedo belt, you deal even less damage. And so what Midway torpedoes hit as hard as Conqueror HE shells? Like one torpedo equals one shell? I don't really know if that's worth it, especially since you most of the time cannot hit all 6 of those torpedoes anyway, meaning that the damage output you're going to deal with a full torpedo hit is actually going to be quite mediocre. All the damage basically is going to come from you causing floodings, which is much more frustrating than taking this kind of alpha damage difference, in my opinion. And I don't think this probably won't be a good change in the long run. But on the other hand, I guess the anti-air thing, the anti-air range thing, anti-air versus concealment thing, while it's going to be annoying as a CV, I'm going to love that as a cruiser. I am definitely going to go play a few Minotaur matches where I will try to surprise CVs as much as possible. And I expect I will have a lot of fun.
You'll probably get a lot of reports too.
What do you mean? People only report you if you are the CV, not when you're the cruiser.
Ah, okay. Raptor, did you have something to throw in?
I was just going to say that I feel like they're going a little heavy-handed with the carrier torpedo nerfs and buffs right now. We know literally in less than a week we're going to rewrite the book on flooding mechanics. So in my mind, we're going to have to revisit all of these flooding chance values again.
So here's what I personally believe, Raptor, that they're going to increase flooding across the board for torpedoes in the same patch notes that they changed the flooding to.
You may be right. I don't know. I mean, we haven't. It hasn't said that yet in all the test versions that we've run, like on PTS. That has not been a part of the testing, so it's possible. But what I'm getting at is that we nerfed Hakuryu's flood chances. Now we've nerfed Midway's flood chances. I can only assume that that's because they're seeing data on their end that indicates too much carrier damage is coming from flooding. Okay, fine, I get that, but literally, you're about to rewrite how flooding works. It's going to do less damage. There's going to be less damage for a single flood, I should say. There's going to be multiple flooding zones, et cetera, et cetera. So flooding should become more common. I feel like we're going to have to rebalance all this again. So to me, to some extent, this feels like we're kind of tilting at windmills, like it's wasted effort.
Well, I mean, one of the things I'm going to move on to the next topic here, is that, they're not content with just this hotfix. They did a dev blog this week that gives kind of the medium-term plans for the CVs through patch 0.8.4, which is May, by the way, so that's a ways out. And some of the highlights included continuing to improve balance of carriers on a macro level, because they said that balancing individual ships at this time just is not what they want to do unless something's grossly out of proportion, like the Hakuryu was. Changing the way overlapping AA works so that AA values aren't just added together on AA ships. So if you have 2 Minotaurs, it's not 2 Minotaurs worth of AA when you're in that. It's actually like a Minotaur and a half. Disincentivizing the F spam, giving economy bonuses to people for shooting down airplanes and doing airplane damage, which is actually now tracked in the thing. And you can see it in the upper right-hand corner. Improving the priority air defense system, which is the sectors. Changing plane spotting ability and removing RPF, which everyone's talked about a bunch. Improving destroyer CV interaction and improving the autopilot for your actual carrier itself. So I guess as far as medium terms go, this seems like a good list, but I guess, is there anything on there that is missing that you guys think needs to be added?
I don't know about the answer to the question, but I have to say that I am so glad that they are finally thinking about doing something about overlapping anti-air and, I guess, destroyer spotting. But one thing I guess I would like to add is that I would like them to add some way that disincentivizes CVs from focus firing a single target. For example, if you take damage from a CV, perhaps your anti-air should be stronger for the next, 2-3 minutes. That way, the optimal strategy for a CV might be that they might want to strike a different target instead. Or maybe, instead of immediately when they take damage, but like 30 seconds, over the next 30 seconds, the anti-air power ramps up to, or 40 seconds or a minute or whatever. Basically, so that when a CV strikes one target, does their few strikes, they're not going to go back to that target. They'll pick somebody else instead. I would like something like that, because I think this would reduce the amount of frustration people have when playing against a strong CV.
Vanessaira, we haven't heard from you in a little bit. What are your thoughts about kind of some of these medium-term goals that they've expressed in the dev blog?
Yeah, I just don't know, because like SeaRaptor was saying, they're going to make some more changes really soon. And it does kind of seem pretty heavy-handed. I am interested, obviously, in the spotting changes. But honestly, it's just this is something that's going to be continually worked on and balanced. So even if, with these changes that we see, it's kind of like, well, we expect it to change even more soon.
Raptor, did you have any final thoughts about these medium-term goals before we move on to some of the other things we got to talk about today?
I was actually pulling up the list here because I had forgotten what all was on it. No, I think a lot of this is stuff that people have all kind of, kvetched about at some point or other since the patch dropped. Certainly the F key spam became a big thing right away. And we've talked, endlessly about the DDCV interaction and all that sort of thing. So they talk about the autopilot. I think the autopilot definitely needs some love. It makes some very bizarro routing decisions when you start clicking on waypoints. So yeah, I think to me, I look at the list and I feel like they've got a solid list of things to work on. How are they going to get there? Well, that's half the adventure, right?
No doubt on that. I mean, I like I said, I'm worried about the evolving nature of carriers. Like, there's so much happening, and they talk about it a little bit in their thing, is that they, how much data do they actually have? They're making changes quickly, and they're getting like a week's worth of data out of it before they make the next change.
That's a very good point, in my opinion. It's not even so much that whether they have or don't have the data. It's more about that the players might not actually have figured out how to play these kinds of things. So it might end up being that the data they collect won't actually end up being representative of what the type of balance changes they made would end up being in the long run, because people figure out new things and it takes time for this stuff to spread. For example, none of us picked up on the Hakuryu stuff during the testing weeks, right? But after it hit live servers, even on the first few days, people quite didn't figure that out. But after, I think it was like 3-4 days, maybe slightly more, people figured out how strong the Hakuryu was. And so these kinds of really short tests, I think, are a bit of an issue because, you don't really get quite the information, or the players don't really get time to figure out how to play it or even play against it, both ways. It goes both ways. One thing I'd like to mention, though, is that I wish that Wargaming gave the Enterprise HE bombs, because Enterprise just feels really lackluster, and the big reason for it is that she has AP bombs, and AP bombs just don't feel very good in most situations.
I have a real hard time with all of the tier 8 premium CVs, Aaron. I mean, all of them just feel, and I think it's more due to the fact that they're tier 8 than the fact that they're premium. Like, all of the tier 8 CVs right now are in an awful place. And part of it is the AA, part of it is the fact that they're getting up tiered to tier 10 so often. I mean, tier 8 CV planes versus tier 10 ships, it's awful. It feels terrible.
Yeah, being under-tiered as a CV is definitely rough, especially the early game. As people, you get out, you can spot, you can harass destroyers, but you're not really going to be able to strike things for a while because you've got to let the team spread out. That overlapping AA from being bottom tier is just really, really unpleasant.
One thing now that you mentioned tiers, I thought of was that, and that Wargaming isn't addressing, is that tier 4 gameplay is terrible. I actually cannot believe the fact that they managed to make something more boring than RTS CVs without manual control. It's terrible. And I would like them to figure out the way to fix it.
So I heard somebody in conjunction with World of Warships talk about having Langley face this week, and I about died.
That's really good. I agree with this, though, by the way. Just I've been playing some games in Hermes gave us Hermes to test, and I've been playing around with it. And, learning to use the munitions is kind of interesting, but the planes are so bloody slow. Like, I can get up from I can just set my plane to fly. I can get up from my desk, go make a cup of coffee, come back, and I'm probably still only partway across the map. Like, tier 4 CV is a rough experience. Because when you finally get there, you try to drop and then you get one torpedo for 2,000 damage or something. Yay.
Yeah, and then the rest of your planes get shut down before you get to do another follow-up.
Exactly.
The worst part is that you can get into those tier 5 and 6 games too, I believe, right? Meaning that you can get into some pretty large maps, and your planes literally go 90 knots. What?
Yeah, tier 5, yes, but tier 6, no.
You get on the same maps. You can have ships that go almost 50 knots. Actually, I think you can even get the La Terrible on many of those maps. So that's even worse. And your plane only goes 90 knots. It's ridiculously slow. I really wish that Wargaming did something about it, because that's not. If you are new to playing CVs, you play that, you're gonna be like, yeah, this class is not for me. Particularly because you need to farm more XP on them, because you need to unlock a tier 6 ships instead of a tier 5 one.
Yeah, no, I think Langley Face and Hosho Face are a real thing. So keep that in mind, guys. I'm
totally stealing that. That's awesome. Langley Face.
I didn't come up with it. I can't even tell you who did, because they would kick my ass. But I have one more thing I want to talk about before we get into listener questions of the week. And that's that we had a bit of a surprise announcement this morning on the dev blog with a new tier 9 American battleship called Georgia. And I don't think that this is an actual, I've never seen any like plans about anything like this. So I think that this may be kind of like a paper ship that got made up. But it's got 3 2-gun turrets that have 457 millimeter guns. Someone mentioned in Discord that it was a cross between Gneisenau and Iowa. And looking at it, they're not really wrong. I have a fair amount of concerns about the performance of a ship like this at tier 9, especially without the torpedoes that make a 6-gun ship like Gneisenau work at tier 7. But I like that we're getting the variety. I like that they're trying different things and trying different ships and having more than just the same thing over and over and over again. In that same article, they announced that they'll be testing a change to Monarch and Conqueror to raise their Citadel to the waterline and slightly improve the repair party for casemate hits as a compensation. Honestly, this has been a long time coming, in my opinion, especially for the zombie battleship Conqueror, because it is impossible to Citadel that ship. This one, it won't be easy, but at least it'll be possible now.
Yeah, I'm glad to see them making changes to Monarch and Conqueror. I've never even finished the British battleship line. That's how uninteresting these ships are to me. But fighting against them feels bad sometimes, so I'm totally on board with this change. Something you may not have noticed on Georgia, as you read through her stats, you kind of fixate on the guns and the AA and all this stuff. She has different AA sector reinforcement than any other battleship currently in the game. It's only 5 seconds to shift her AA sector and a 50% bonus. So one of the things that I noticed as I sat down to start compiling AA stats a few weeks ago into my various spreadsheets was that by decoupling all these various AA stats, every tier now has an accuracy, for example, in their various short, middle, and long range auras. That you have all this ability now to start impacting other captains. We can start inventing captain skills or differentiating ships via their AA. For example, Georgia, her AA sector is able to shift very quickly. She's the first ship that we've seen them try to do this on, and I think we're going to see more of it as we go down the road.
I get that is interesting, SeaRaptor, but I don't think that makes up for the fact that I don't know that I want to be shooting 6 guns at tier 9.
I don't disagree with you there, right? Like I still to this day am not a huge fan of Gneisenau because the 6 guns just feels awful when they, you're at 6 kilometers and yay, German dispersion. We've all been there. But to me, the most interesting thing about this ship is that we're kind of digging deeper into the American archives to find something interesting. This AP shell damage, 15,750. That's the highest AP shell damage in the game. I'm assuming that's a super heavy version of an American 18-inch shell is where they're getting that from.
So what I'm actually curious about, and what might make this something that I would want to play, is if they give it the American armor, the American heavy cruiser armor normalization, or the AP normalization.
I have a very difficult time seeing them doing that for a battleship. I mean, the American battleships don't get that now.
But it's 6 guns.
Yeah, well, we'll just have to see. She does have a 2.0 Sigma, so that's got, that's something to consider.
I was just looking at that.
Yeah. So to me, at first glance, you kind of roll your eyes a little bit. Yeah, it's the love child of an Iowa and a Gneisenau, and maybe with a Conqueror thrown in there for good measure. But as you start to dig into the numbers, there's some interesting things going on here. Yeah, I agree the AA sector shift thing is not enough to make me want to play the ship. But what I like about it is it's a signal for the future that this is another way we can start differentiating ships, and even then, maybe even potentially captains and captain skills.
I don't think you're wrong about that at all, SeaRaptor. I do think that that's a positive thing. Arun, Vanessa, did you guys have any thoughts about Georgia before we go into some listener questions?
Checked out the anti-air, and while the sector thing is interesting and all, the numbers for the anti-air seem they seem like they're appropriate for like a tier 5 or 6 ship for some reason. Like the flak explosion deals 144 damage. What?
I think it's a typo.
That's nothing?
I was just looking at that.
I think so too. Okay.
It might be
anyway,
1,440 damage.
Maybe. Although the other one would be 3,850 then, if it was also a typo. So 6 guns, I thought it might not be that bad if you had faster reload. But you don't have faster reload. This is the same reload as Musashi has, or Iowa has, or Missouri, or Yamato. This is gonna be
painful.
I don't know.
Painful is the word.
I don't think 2.0 Sigma is enough. This is, I don't know, especially since, you can't overmatch 32 millimeters with these either. So I'm not really sure what you're gonna do with this ship. You'll be kind of like the other American battleships, except when they do show you broadside, you don't hit as hard. So I don't know. This is, I guess we'll see. Oh, and did you notice AP initial velocity 732 meters per second? Yeah, those are slow shells too.
So here's
wait, they're actually slower than the Iowa.
They're slower than Iowa, and they're slower than, I believe they're slower than the Yamato. I'd have to go check, but the other thing that's interesting to me is they didn't put her armor values on here. They put her plating values, saying that she's got 32 millimeters of plating, but they did not put what her belt armor will be. If she has Iowa belt armor, then she's in trouble. If she has Montana belt armor, this is going to be a pretty tanky ship.
Those shells, that AP shell velocity is what I like to call North Carolina slow. They are just a smidge faster than North Carolina's 701 meters a second.
I was actually thinking about this, and perhaps what Kellarn suggested about them getting the better bounce angles might actually be the case. That would make up for this kind of a disadvantage. The other thing I suppose might be that maybe these shells are supposed to have a very high arc, so that we actually get to do like deck penetrations instead or something like that.
Yeah. Does this ship interest you at all, Vanessa?
Actually, it does. But
trust
again,
Vanessa.
Still no USS Washington. We get another U.S. battleship, but no USS Washington. But yeah, just looking at it, the 33 knots is pretty nice. The stealth rating on it, I think when maxed out, looks like it's going to be pretty good as well. I kind of wish they would bump the secondary range up just a smidge. But I think, obviously I think we're going to be, testing this with, the accuracy mod and trying to make those shells. But, North Carolina, that's like one of my favorite battleships in the game. And that ship seems very, very accurate with that, those plunging shells. And if you know how to make that ship work in the fire arcs and everything, I feel like this one might be similar. And if they do have some type of, plunging mechanic with this, this ship actually might work. And I know it's going to be salt inducing at times, but it's possible this ship might work. So I'm actually really interested in testing this one.
Yeah, we'll definitely have a lot of things to say when we actually do get to test this one, which will probably be in the next few months. So we have some listener questions of the week. This is our new segment that we'll be doing weekly. The response to this segment was great last week, so we'll definitely be doing it every week, and we'll be asking you guys for questions every week. So in case questions will not carry over, so you if I didn't pick your question this week or last week, then you'll have to ask it again in the future. Let's get started. Actually, the first person that reacted to this was one of our fellow CCs over on the EU region. He's a big fan of the podcast. He told me his name is Stats Bloke, and he wanted to ask a question. What was the thing about being a CC would you most like the community to understand, which they might not know about already?
I would say one of the things about being a community contributor is we do like a lot of testing, and we put in a lot of work into trying to test these ships and to try and do this content. And while some people might know or understand that, I don't think people understand, like, some of these ships, like, we exhaustively play. And you really kind of get an appreciation for what the super testers do, because they put in even more work than what we do. And so I would say, that's probably one of the biggest things is, like, it might seem like, ooh, I get to test new shiny stuff. There's a lot of stuff that Wargaming wants us to do, and they put a lot of pressure on us to make sure that we are testing these ships. And not only can the testing be kind of difficult, but oftentimes when you bring a new ship out and you're playing it, you can kind of take a lot of incoming fire, if you will. You kind of become the new shiny thing that everyone wants to see, well, how does it stand up against this? And you can take a lot of focus fire, a lot of heat. And so that makes it even harder to test the ship and to really try and make sure that you're bringing out, you're testing the ship and you're bringing out all the different angles and thoughts and things that, might make the ship appeal to, this or that player and the balance of it. And there's a lot of work that goes into it.
SeaRaptor, how about you?
I think for me, it's going to be a lot less glamorous than Vanessaira's answer. I think for me, it's about people. I wish people better understood the relationship that CCs have with Wargaming. I think there's a lot of misconceptions out there that they feel like we're, paid shills or we're part of the development team. I don't know exactly which, right? We're certainly not a part of the development team, right? Like the guys designing the game make the decisions, right? Now, they will sometimes solicit our feedback. Sometimes they won't. Like we don't get to pick and choose when they come and ask us for our input. And even then, when we give them that input, most of the CCs, I will say, you will find, I started to say you won't find two CCs that agree. That's not true. But there's very commonly a wide variety of opinions, right? As you would expect. Some people like, this part of the core, this part of the CC group likes the change, this part of the CC group doesn't. So they have to gather that feedback and parse it accordingly. But ultimately, at the end of the day, the decision is still theirs, right? So I think sometimes players feel like we have some kind of magical, ability to impact or radically change the development or the direction of the game. And depending on what's being discussed, that's not always the case. We can provide feedback. We can tell them, hey guys, a lot of folks don't think this is great or whatever. And that's certainly been happening these last few weeks with the CV rework, a lot of feedback going back and forth regarding, again, destroyer and carrier interactions and that sort of thing. But, at the end of the day, we don't get to make the judgment call. We're not the guys responsible for it. We're here to promote the community, right? So we're here to encourage players to get to know each other, to hang out together, to have fun playing the game. Or to have fun playing the game ourselves. Some CCs, this is what they do for a living. Some CCs, it isn't. I feel like if it were anything, I feel like it would just be I wish people wouldn't try to pigeonhole the entire program into one box, because every individual contributor has a different thing that they do. For you guys, it's the podcast. For me, it's mostly tournament organizing, and I do a little Twitch streaming on the side. For some people, it's full-time Twitch streaming, right? And so for some people, that's even how they make their living, how they put food on their table. Everybody comes at things from a different angle, but we're all part of this global program, which is a good thing because it gives Wargaming a good perspective, a broad swath of places they can draw opinions from when they want it. But I feel like sometimes the community misinterprets that, and they feel like that we're all just some kind of, some Wargaming marketing group, paid shills or whatever here to espouse whatever the latest opinion is. I know Zoop this week, he put out a video about the population there were a lot of talk back and forth about population levels of the game, and in one of the NA forums threads, people were like throwing up pictures of Baghdad Bob, and I was just kind of like, you guys, you're missing the point of this relationship. So I guess that would be my wish if I could get it granted.
Aaron, you have a bit of a different perspective because Vanessa, SeaRaptor, and I are all part of the NA CC program. Do you feel like being in the EU CC program is any different? And what is your perspective?
There's an EU CC program?
Haha.
Well, it's a joke. It's meant as a joke, but honestly, I would actually say that this has been my experience, because unless you yourself go out to do stuff, with the EUCC program, even way back when, unless you go to wargaming with something, they really won't talk to you too much about it. We have the global program, and there's talk through that, but there was very little discussion like between the CCs and wargaming beforehand. Like, we could go to them as CCs, but they wouldn't really come to us, except the chip testing stuff. And so maybe this gives me a slightly different opinion on the whole CC program. And the thing I would like to mention is that, at least as far as I'm concerned, and I imagine many other CCs though, we are basically, you could even consider completely independent of wargaming. Yes, there's the testing stuff going on, but at the end of the day, we can at any point basically part ways and go do our own thing, which means that we aren't really, our opinions are our own. They're not really influenced by wargaming, or at least I hope this is the case for all of the CCs, because at least I haven't noticed any situations where wargaming has tried to influence anybody directly. I mean, of course, when people are, say bad words too much, there is the idea that wargaming might come and tell you that, hey, knock that off. But I am not really aware that this has happened to anybody. So this means that anything you see from CCs should be what they think, instead of anything that wargaming, would like them to say. And this is really, really, really important, because people sometimes seem to get this mixed up. They seem to think that CCs basically represent the game or represent wargaming in some way or something along those lines. I don't think that's the case. And I wish the community, thought the same.
Fair enough. I guess I'm going to echo some of the things that have already been said. In terms of the CC program and being a CC, I think that it's a big deal, and it's something that, those of us who are CCs, we treasure being a CC. But I think that people need to realize that not everybody looks at being a CC the same way. To take, each person does give their own opinion, but just because they're giving their opinion doesn't mean they're right. It doesn't mean they're talking for wargaming. It really just, it's what they are, and to take each person individually and not read too much into it. So, I mean, that unless we say something, we got this from wargaming and it is officially X, it's our opinion, and you take it that way. So one of our Patreon backers, Alexander, asks, the gameplay in World of Warships shifts heavily from Tier 6 to Tier 8. While Tier 6 usually is quite exciting because people get into action and take risks, Tier 8 to Tier 10 matches, however, can be incredibly passive, especially in the first few minutes. Cruisers hide and fire behind islands, DDs hide from radar and planes, and BBs don't want to push because they get left alone. What do you guys think wargaming could do to promote a more fun and engaging gameplay?
Arms race?
It's funny you say that, because that's actually what the first thing that I thought of when I looked at this, is that things like arms race and things like you remember the mode that was like the PUBG mode, the Battle Royale mode, where you have to get closer and closer to center. Stuff like that, I think, can improve this particular issue.
But not Bastion.
Well, and it's...
What do you mean? Bastion is great, though.
Well, you have to remember, at its core, Bastion was still domination mode, right? Like it was just domination mode with short guns. The other modes are a little different. For me, I like the idea of arms race. I I still like Epicenter. I know a lot of people don't like Epicenter. I like Epicenter because it forces a certain amount of interaction and it changes how people play. To me, I think the best thing that can be done, especially at high tier, right? Like high tier is the most punishing. You screw up early, you get spotted out of position, you get spotted too early. It only takes one guy on the other team to be a good shot or get lucky with his battleship dispersion, and you're gone, right? So in my mind, you can't solve this problem by ship balance. You have to solve this problem with game modes. And I think that's exactly what you guys are trying to say. And I agree. I think Arms Race is a fantastic start. And I think there's some other options that are coming out that they're going to test that give us more possibilities there. So I like that idea.
Alrighty. Well, and then our last question for the day is from GM Schwartz on Facebook, who asks, according to the patch notes for 0.8.0.3, visibility of all ships from the air is reduced by 20%. This allows the Minotaur and Worcester to stealth AA. Air detection would be 5.92 kilometers. Long range would be 6.3. Do you guys agree that this is an issue? If I lose planes, I immediately turn away from Minotaur after spotting him under the current detection system, but it'll be a death sentence if I enter that far into Minotaur A before knowing it, because it takes time to churn out and escape.
Correction, long-range anti-air is 6.9, not 6.3. That's a rather important thing to keep in mind. And the answer is that is a death sentence, especially if you're a Tier 8 CV, your planes are just dead. I mean, okay, that's kind of an exaggeration. If you fly into a flak cloud, you're dead. Done. You can just press F immediately. If you somehow manage to avoid the flak clouds, you're going to take a lot of damage, but you should still be able to do 1 strike on a target. 2 strikes, probably stretching it, depending on what the anti-air of the target is. But yeah, that's going to be very, very, very deadly. And if your planes are really fast, like, for example, a Graf Zeppelins, you might actually end up getting close enough that you somehow end up at the medium range anti-air, in which case they're just dead.
So I guess the bigger thing is this a problem for gameplay? Yes, we agree that they're dead. Is this bad gameplay?
I don't know that it's bad gameplay. For me, I think the answer to this question is absolutely yes. I think this is an issue. I think what Wargaming is doing now with 083 is they're taking their paintbrush and they're just whacking everyone's air detection by 20% across the board, and they're going to see what happens. And I think eventually what we're going to discover down the road, once they gather some numbers and we see where we land, is that they're going to have to go back in individually and muck about with individual ships' air spotting radius, right? Because for certain ships, it needs to be lower. For certain ships, it was probably okay in the previous iteration. And for certain ships, maybe it needs to be higher. I don't know. I don't know the answer. But I think what we're seeing now is simply it's faster and easier for them to just go in and knock 20% off everybody and see what happens than it is to try and balance individual ships.
I think whether it's going to be bad gameplay depends on how many of those ships you have in your game. If you have too many, that's basically, at some point, if you have too many, that's a match you might actually just not want to play at all. And that's never a good thing.
See, I keep playing the Tier 8 premium series because I don't have any of the Tier 10s. And I have the Tier 8 premiums that I can mess around with on my account. And honestly, I don't have fun. I do.
Press F to pay respects.
Vanessa, can you tell us why are you making this joke?
Well, no, Arun brought that up earlier. Press F, they're dead. Yeah, press F to pay respect, because at that point, I mean, I almost kind of look at it like, what if when you're a destroyer and there's like an obscene amount of radar ships on the other team, and it's kind of along those lines. Yes, I hope for better balancing, and yes, the Tier 8 CVs, it just feel really bad against when you see a lot of Tier 10s, but that was still the same with the RTS carriers. I mean, that was a lot of those matches were really, really tough. You could get lineups where like the AA was just under the old RTS CVs, where it's just wow, even the destroyers have good AA. And you just be like, well, I don't know what I'm going to strike. You're just going to kind of circle around and spot and wait towards the end of the match to hopefully get some decent strikes in. And, they're trying to find a good balance and a good way here. But yeah, tier 8 is a really tough tier. I don't know. I mean, you go one way with the balanced pendulum and you're going to make CV players really happy and everyone else kind of really ticked. And then you go the other way and you're going to piss off CV players and everyone else will be fine with it. But I don't know. Wargaming's in a really tough spot here.
I agree that they're in a tough spot. I also have some concerns about them whipsawing back and forth like this with patches. We talked about that. We asked if they were going to be ready when Earl Grey, Mike was on the show. Were they going to be ready to provide patches quickly as things came up with the CV rework? And they have held to that. But the patches we've gotten have been heavy-handed, I guess is the way I want to put that. Do you guys feel the same way?
I do for this one, I think a little bit. I think the previous two, not so much, especially the second one. 802 was a very, very small incremental change in AA. 801, I think, was the big Hakuryu sledgehammer that it needed. This particular patch is the first one that I think might be a little heavy-handed, right? I think everyone, if you've played games recently, you can look at it and say, okay, aerial spotting, particularly early game aerial spotting, is an issue. So the response to that, at least the quick response to that is, all right, we slash everybody's aerial detection by 20%. But now that introduces a different set of issues with AA ranges, which they were very careful, in this new AA mechanic system to cap everybody's ranges at specific ranges. No one is allowed. There are no more buffs or mods that you can pump the AA range of your specific ship. So they've locked in the variable of AA range. But now with the spotting changes, now you've introduced some, side effects. So I don't know. To me, this is the first one that I would look at and say this feels a little heavy-handed, especially when you pair that with the midway nerfs, which I'm kind of scratching my head over a little bit. Like those torpedoes just tickle, right? Those are going to tickle a tier 10 battleship's torpedo belt. I mean, okay, I went to all this work and I dropped 4 torpedoes and did 2,000 damage a torpedo. Ugh, feels great,
But that's the way I feel about all the carriers. Like I do all this work to try and get take a plane wave in, and then I get nothing or next to nothing. It just feels like a grind.
It is a bit, and I think some of it is because the planes cycle so much more quickly, right? Like used to, you spent the time you spent in a carrier in the old system was in preparing the strike, getting your planes off the deck, organizing everything, picking the angle, routing the strike, as an example, okay? So that you could come in from the right direction. There is still some of the routing thing, right? You still have to approach your target from the right angle, depending on whether you're trying to do a torpedo drop or a bomb drop or a rocket attack. But there's less time preparing a strike. It's okay, that strike's over, double press a button, and I'm back in the game. So individual, individual attacks always don't feel like I did a whole lot. But then you look up 12 minutes in and you've got 100,000 damage sometimes. And it's like, okay, well.
I look up and I have 25,000 damage 10 minutes into the battle, and I feel awful.
I guess it.
That's because you're playing tier 6.
But
yeah. Okay. So agreed. If you're playing bottom tier carrier, that's not going to feel so good, especially in the early game. The power of the carrier has always been, I won't say always been, frequently has been the longer the game goes on, the more powerful the carrier, the more influence the carrier could have over a battle because there was fewer ships around, less AA to shoot planes down, et cetera, et cetera. That hasn't changed, right? Only now you have to struggle with keeping your deck loads up so that you can continue to launch strikes. Whereas before, you simply lost planes permanently. Now you don't lose planes permanently, but you do find yourself in a position of having to launch potentially underpowered strikes that amplifies the impact of the incoming AA that you are receiving. So it's a different kind of balance.
I would like to mention on that last note, while the incoming anti-air is scarier, you don't actually lose all that much in strike power because you generally can only do 1 or 2 strikes anyway, because the rest of the squadron just gets shut down if you go for another run anyway. So it's not that big of a deal that they're missing.
Right. It just means that you take losses quicker than you would have with a full squadron because there's fewer places for the damage to go. That's all it means.
Alrighty, well, thank you guys very much for your stuff. Thank you very much for coming on to the show today with us, Raptor. We always like having you on. I like hearing about the KoTS stuff. Do you know if they're going to do a broadcast of the finals from Austin this year again?
Yes, indeed. I'll be back in Austin on Saturday, the 16th of March, to do the North American finals.
I will not
believe
be
my
here.
co-caster this time is. Oh, bummer. Well, that's okay. Kami Samurai and I are going to be doing the finals this time. That's the plan anyway. So yeah, I'll be back up in Austin to do the finals. And of course, you and I will be aboard USS Texas in a couple of Saturdays.
No, I'm definitely looking forward to that. What was your reaction when you saw in the forum post that we were on the schedule?
I was actually surprised it was so short. You and I were the only two. I figured there were some other people in Texas or in the area that might have gotten an invite, but didn't happen. So okay,
yeah, no, I thought we might have seen.
They were busy.
We might have
seen
Notzer because he's here in the San Antonio region, I think.
Yeah, maybe he's somewhere in Texas. I know that, and it might be they invited him and he's busy. I'm not sure. Maybe he had a prior commitment, but I would have expected to see him on that list as well.
Yeah. Alrighty, well, I'll see you in a couple of weeks, and then we'll kind of go from there. Yeah, I'm going on a pig hunt. We're going boar hunting with my father-in-law on the 16th.
Nice.
So I'm out of town.
No worries. Well, yep. I appreciate you guys having me on. I love the show. I'm a big fan. I've only got to come a couple of times, but I appreciate the opportunity to come and pimp out King of the Sea a little bit and talk about it, and then just at that point, the hard part's over. I get to participate, and I appreciate that.
Yeah, it's great to get differing opinions and stuff. So, Arun, Vanessaira, did you guys have anything else to cover before we close out?
No.
All right, well, that makes it easy. As Aaron says, look for the episodes to be on YouTube, as we are now on YouTube with our episodes, if you guys care to watch us there. But that's it for this week. We do have a new spot on the NA forums for just the Warships podcast, so be sure to check that out for news and for posts. We will have the link for that in the episode description. We also will have the link for the USS Texas event that Raptor and I will be going to, so you guys can go and get your tickets and stuff there. And as always, follow us on Facebook at facebook.com/Warships Podcast and Twitter at Warships Podcast for updates between episodes. Don't forget to check out Arun on YouTube and Twitch as well. You've been doing some great videos on the CVs and stuff, Aaron. I do enjoy watching those.
Actually, speaking of that, if anybody wants to see the impact of anti-air that we will have with the Worcester change, go check out my video. It should be Kaga anti-air is fine. Just check out the first 10 seconds. You'll see how fine it is.
Good old Arun humor. And we, of course, want to thank our amazing Patreon backers. If you're interested in supporting us, please consider becoming a Patreon backer yourself. Backers are what make the podcast possible, and we couldn't do it without you guys. And you will get first call on getting questions answered in our Question of the Week segment. So take care, everyone, and we'll see you next week.